Good afternoon, sir. I'm Rishit Agarwal, and I'll be presenting my research paper on SimCLR. So this paper SimCLR is based on the research paper of Simple Framework for Contrastive Learning of Visual Representations. It was a breakthrough in unsupervised and self-supervised learning from the supervised learning algorithms. As from this paper, we could actually find out that even unsupervised learning algorithms or a framework of unsupervised learning can perform as well as as a supervised learning framework. So let's look into the learnings, unsupervised learning and self-supervised learning. So what's the difference between the two? Unsupervised learning does not is the supervised learning without the labels, right? So we don't have the labels here. But self-supervised learning, here we make our own labels from the existing data. So as you can see, there is some data on which we kind of create a pretext task, and then and for some other downstream task we fine tune the model using the representations which are already found in the pre-trained portion. So what's new in contrastive learning? So contrastive learning majorly focuses on two different aspects. Here it focuses on it's a self-supervised type of task or a learning, but it includes a set method or a set architecture. So here the main idea behind contrastive learning is to bring these similar items together and to bring different items farther apart. So here the concept of positive samples and negative samples come into the picture. So let's say a dog. So any two augmentations on a dog's image are still the augmentations of the same image, right? So these both are positive pair of samples. But let's suppose a dog and a car. These two things are completely separate two images. These are negative samples. So here we are aiming to, in contrastive learning, we are aiming to bring closer together the augmentations of the same image, but push the two different images farther apart. So here, as you can see, there are three layer structure: an augmentation layer, a CNN layer which is actually an encoder layer, and an MLP layer which is actually a projection head. So we'll see how this entire framework works in the in some next slides. So yeah, the framework of SimCLR. Let me show you the framework of SimCLR in a simple way. So first of all, augmentation. So what does augmentation mean? There are different type of data augmentations available: cropping, rotation, color distortion, Gaussian blur, and so on. So as you can see here, if this is the original image of the dog, then cropping and resizing includes this particular image, and we can even flip the image as a part of augmentation. We can color distort it in different various ways. We can rotate it, cut out or mask it in some way, or bring in Gaussian noise or Gaussian blur it. So these are different types of data augmentations. Here in SimCLR, when various multiple experimentations were conducted, three major data augmentations were taken into account. So the first one was cropping and resizing the image. So the image was randomly cropped. Here, randomly cropped. Why is that brought into picture? I'll again discuss that later on. But first, data augmentation was random cropping. The second was color distortion. So once the picture was randomly cropped, it was randomly color distorted. And the third one was Gaussian blurring of the image. These three augmentations were applied on every image randomly, and then on further experiments, it was noticed that cropping, as you can see here in this particular confusion matrix as well, or the heat map as well, where cropping works best with color. So that means these two features are actually complementing each other and giving very good performances. So yeah, now let's come to why random cropping. So why random cropping instead of a set type of cropping? This is because random cropping tries to cover global as well as local views. So random cropping, we don't know what kind of cropping is going to happen. It can be a crop of a larger portion of an area or a smaller portion of an area. But if we do an exclusive kind of cropping, then we are completely sure that some areas they are not gonna overlap. So random cropping is just an idea which was represented in this paper, which was working very well than a set type of cropping. Let's now come to contrastive loss. So once this was just the data augmentation part. Once this data augmentation was done, so the next part was our encoder layer. This encoder layer was able to produce some representations of our augmented images, and from these representations we apply a non-linear projection head over this in order to get our final projected embeddings. These projected embeddings were known to were then like a loss function was applied on these different projection embeddings which were obtained, and if these projection embeddings were closer together, then that means the pair was a similar pair, and if they were far, that means the pair was a negative sample or negative pair. So now the question might occur that why not use the representations themselves for the contrastive loss, or why even go through this non-linear projection head layer? So this non-linear projection head layer itself was a very important aspect in this paper, which is very experimental. So the experimentations were done with a linear layer without a projection head and a non-linear projection head, and it was observed that applying a non-linear projection head actually removes all the kind of similarities in the representations which were used for the downstream tasks, and introduced the kind of variations which we want for similar pairs and dissimilar pairs. This is why the contrastive loss was finally applied on the embeddings obtained, but the representations which were obtained after the encoder layer were the ones which were used for downstream tasks. Let's move on to the contrastive loss function. So this is a contrastive loss function which takes the use of the similarity function between the two projection head embeddings, and there is this tau thing. The tau, this is a as you can see, this is a softmax function. So a negative softmax function is applied in order to minimize it. But what does this tau mean? So this tau is a temperature parameter that controls the concentration level of the distribution. This line is not pretty clear over here, but let me explain it to you more. Let's suppose your temperature parameter is 0.1, which means it's very less, which also means that the similarity term divided by tau will get amplified. Once this term gets amplified, so if the pair of Zi and Zj are closer together, then they'll get more closer. That means their positive aspect will get more amplified. But if the similarity is very less, that means Zi and Zj might be a negative pair. Then the lower the value of tau, the more negative it will go to. Not in the sense of the magnitude negative, but as in the sense of the similarity. The similarity will lead them to a negative pair. So this tau parameter, if less, will try to discriminate or distinguish more better in the positive pairs and the negative pairs. But what about if tau is high? So if a tau is a very high value like a 1 or a 0.9, then that means that it is trying to just keep the scale as it is of similarity, and will not amplify the negative examples a lot. So here in my further experimentations, I have kept my tau value as 0.5 so that it can give us a balanced approach. The similarity function is a cosine similarity function, and as we have already talked about, every images will have two data augmentations. That means if there are n images, then we'll be having a data set of 2 n images, where each image will have only one corresponding positive image and all other are negative samples. So this is what here it's written. Let's go on to the results in the paper. So let me discuss this graph in detail. Here this graph shows that SimCLR, here is the supervised learning performance, which is less number of parameters but high accuracy. But SimCLR, as we increase the number of parameters, SimCLR is actually able to come at par with the supervised learning algorithm, which is a very, very important breakthrough of this paper, because here we are able to say that an unsupervised learning algorithm is actually performing at par with the supervised learning algorithm. Now I have performed some experimentations and implementations of my own, where I first trained the SimCLR model. I used a ResNet 18 encoder, as well as a simple MLP layer for the projection head. Here, since I was constrained with time and resources, as for training a large amount of data, it was taking almost hours. So I took a CIFAR 10 dataset and only a sample of it. So I took a sample of 10,000 images to train my model with 100 epochs. And over these 100 epochs, I ran my code and observed that the training loss was decreasing throughout as a trend. It was fluctuating in the middle a bit. That might be because of some new features that it might be learning during the training process with every new image. But at an overall scale, it has reduced from 6 to approx 5.2 over all the 100 epochs. I then evaluated. When I received the representations from this encoder layer, I used these pre-trained representations into my downstream tasks. First downstream task which I did was linear evaluation, which is a pretty simple task. I just included one final layer. I used the simple task because I did not want a complex model to improve the performance over the SimCLR. I wanted to see the performance of SimCLR's embeddings rather than a complex model's performance. So yeah, this was the evaluation, and here let me show you the confusion matrix. So over CIFAR 10 we can see that majorly the diagonal elements are the correct predictions, but we can see some incorrect predictions in, let's say, class number 1 and class number 9. So why is this so? So when I cross-checked through my dataset, so the class number 1 was actually a car and class number 9 was a truck. So it is pretty clear that a car and a truck are pretty similar in the features, in their looking as well. So which is why the model was not able to differentiate between it properly. And I would also mention it that since the dataset that I have used is pretty small, then the performance, the unsupervised model was not able to learn the embeddings in a better way. So yeah, this is something which can be done with more resources and more time. But yeah, this is my result for now. And one more thing that I did was label efficiency. So label efficiency, I wanted to compare whether if I give some label data to these representations, are they able to perform even better. So I observed that after a particular percentage of, let's say, 50% label data, there was absolutely no increase, almost no increase in the accuracy. There was a great increase for the 10% of the data. That means that if you give 10% of the label data, then almost all of the accuracy that you are going to get till 100% of the data is there, almost again. So the accuracy is not much, although I would say that it's only like 47% right now. But that is again, as I mentioned, due to lack of training data and maybe smaller batch sizes and smaller epochs. So a larger batch size and a more number of epochs is actually good for these unsupervised learning tasks, as it was also mentioned greatly in detail in the paper. This is because these type of approaches increase the number of negative samples, and as we have already looked into the contrastive loss function, there the negative samples are the only way of learning in this algorithm. So the more the number of negative samples, the more the learning of the model. So this is why this particular performance is observed. But still, with this performance also, it is very clear that even with limited label data, the model is able to achieve that much accuracy which it might achieve over 100% of the label data. This is my TSNE map. Again, some of the clusters are clear, but a lot of them are mixed together due to these parameters which I have already mentioned. But I think this is a starting point from which more of this can be experimented, and it's also kind of complying with the paper's results that this kind of an unsupervised method is actually useful. So this was all from my side, and I hope I'll be as you'll go through my blog over this thing, a more detailed analysis of every point and every mathematical aspect is also covered. I've also included some snapshots of my code and implementation for and the inferences of the results in order to give a better view. Thank you so much.